Welcome to the From Battle to Business podcast. In this podcast, business coach and fellow veteran Dean Van Dyke will bridge the gap between service and civilian life, helping guide veteran business owners to supercharge their business and unlock hidden profits. You wouldn't go into battle alone, and now you don't have to in business. Let's get to it.
Welcome, Rick. Looking forward to having you on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me on here, Dean.
Outstanding. So in 60 seconds or less, tell us who Rick is.
I am a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force. I spent 20 years in the Air Force. About half my career was flying, and second half of my career, I was an acquisitions officer. And acquisitions is the profession of putting companies on contract for the government. So I got a lot of experience in a lot of different areas, working with rapid tech development here in the Boston, Massachusetts area, working with foreign military sales overseas, and just about everything in between. Then I transitioned. I retired in 2019. And one of the things that bothered me, I guess you could say, while I was in, was the amount of spending that the government does on small businesses in particular, and the lack of awareness of the opportunity and the process. And we talked a little bit before this, the process can be complex if you don't know how to get through it. So I wanted to do something where I could help streamline the process for small businesses in particular and raise the awareness because we continue with the government has to put small businesses on contract. Government buys just about everything you could think of. They spend more and more year over year, yet less than half of 1% of small businesses in the United States actually sell to the government, and that number's going down. The number of businesses are decreasing, small businesses year over year. So we got a problem on our hands, and I preferred to work with those type of businesses. They usually could pivot faster. They have innovative technologies. They're patriots. They're not bound by the bureaucracy that a lot of bigger companies are. So that's me in a nutshell. I've been doing that since and haven't looked back, and really I've been enjoying it.
Awesome. So, well, thank you for your sacrifice. I know a lot of times as veterans we hear is thank you for your service, but I like to say sacrifice because we gave up quite a bit. So did our families. So how did your 20-year career help shape who you are?
Wow, that's a deep question. I mean, I would say that, aside from, what I learned from my parents and some of, the lessons I had to learn, growing up, it was fundamental in shaping who I was. And I think a lot of service members, in all professions have a similar experience where all of a sudden you're taking out of an environment where, you're free to kind of do what you want within the bounds of the law. And then now a lot of those freedoms are taken away from you. And after, going through some of your training, your initial training, you start realizing that, and this is what I really appreciate, I don't know of any other place on earth that really can train leaders like the military does. Because, it's, it's a cycle. You train, you learn what you're going to do. They, at a very young age, they give you people, money to manage, maybe a dangerous mission, right? And once you master that, what do? They give you more, and then more training, then more. So more people, more money, maybe more dangerous, right? And they just keep piling it on and on, with the ultimate objective, right? The pinnacle of the military or the highest level leaders, the general officer, which is really a generalist. They're really training you to be able to lead and manage in any situation. And that goes for enlisted and officer, because as leadership happens at the lowest levels in the military. So I feel like I was forged, in the military in a way, and not all pleasant experiences, but, it certainly teaches you patience and how to work with, all different kinds of people that aren't like you, and to be united in a common mission. And protecting the United States, kind of being the best that we could be, being honest, being great at your job, being determined and persistent, all of that. And I'm very grateful. I met my wife in the military, had my family while I was in the military. It took me around the world. It gave me a lot of opportunities, and then brought me back home right before I retired. So I'm very thankful.
Yeah, it's one of the things how we don't realize while we're doing the work, how we're being shaped and prepped for whatever the future holds, whether it's in that next mission or it's the next training evolution. And it's interesting to see currently my son's on active duty in the Army as an infantry officer, and just seeing he was promoted to major January. And so just seeing that evolution, and it's interesting and then talking with folks about how we're shaped through the skills, and you as a pilot, I mean, and with your background in acquisition as well. And so with that,
I do want to correct, so my friends don't throw spears at me. I was a navigator in the
navigator. Gotcha. Oh yeah. I forget if you don't. I have a lot of. I've got a few Air Force pilots, Navy pilots, and it's interesting, and Army pilots in our Veterans of Foreign Wars. And you're right. If one of them gets something wrong,
oh yeah, they'll correct you for sure.
They're all over it.
No, don't get me wrong. The navigators are a lot smarter, a lot better looking than the pilots out there. But I'll give them a break here, and but I did want to justify, at least be honest here about what we were doing. But yeah, no, I love it. It was a great experience.
No worries. I always like to harass the Air Force pilots about not being able to land on a floating, moving metal deck, but
some of them can't land on a runway, so that's not good. So you can add that to your list.
There we go. Well, some of them they're Vietnam. They were forward air controllers, and they flew those small Cessnas, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to be those guys, but no. So let's jump into selling to the government, because I know there's many benefits to it. How can, just kind of at a high level, explain the process, how a business can get to the point where they're able to acquire contracts and business from the government?
Yeah. Okay. And so big picture, there's, I guess you could say, there's benefits and there's drawbacks, right? So I think it's good for everyone to understand that first, B2G, or business to government, or public sector, however you want to call it, mm-hmm. The government doesn't buy the same way that you and I can buy something, or another business can buy something. So this has basically been regulated since George Washington's time, right? During the birth of the country. And so just taking that into account when we talk about selling to the government, when you sell to the government, the first thing you want to ask, or first question you really want to answer, is, does the government buy what you sell? Mm-hmm. Right. So when I said they buy everything, they do buy just about everything. I know most of your listeners, or a lot of them, are military. So, they know that, a military base is really a small town or city. So everything that goes into that needs to be purchased, from landscaping to, they have accountants that they, mm-hmm. that are civilians that they put on, not just GS, but, they have contracts with small businesses to do things like bookkeeping and tax prep. They have put lawyers on contract. They have builders, teachers, school supplies, food, everything, right? Tai Chi lessons, meditation lessons, right? So lots of training. So, but we do have a mechanism for seeing how much the government is buying of what we sell, right? So let's just say you were an accountant, for instance, and you want to know, hey, is it worth it for me to sell to the government? So you go to usaspending.gov, which is a free website. We were talking about government websites associated with this, right? So the government websites aren't perfect, so don't expect much, but it does give you, for free, it can give you a big picture understanding of how much the government's buying, or does the government buy what you sell at all, if it's something unique. So you can go into there, and and I have I think a tutorial on one of my podcast episodes about how to use some of the free tools to do that, which is a DoD Contract Academy. But what they can do is they can go on there, they can search under the accounting NAICS code, North American Industry Classification Code, and they might find out that the government spends $1 billion a year on accounting services. And then you can refine that again, say, okay, well, how much does the government spend on accounting services from small businesses? Because you can put that parameter in there and be like, oh, they spend, I'm just making these numbers up, right? Oh, it's 400 million a year, right? So you can get an idea. And okay, so now I know that there's an opportunity. It's actually a pretty big opportunity. So as I mentioned, there aren't a lot of small businesses selling to the government. So first you want to know, do they buy what you sell? You can look at other businesses that are like yours using the same tool, kind of get an idea of what they're doing, at least as far as their federal sales are year over year. You can see who they're selling to. So that's the first piece of this. Determine that there's a need, determine that there's actually a product or service that you can sell to the government that they're buying. And then from there, you want to put together a plan for how you're going to go after some of that.
Interesting. So it's very similar to a B2B, B2C research your market, your target market, how you want to go after it, understand if there is an opportunity. And so, so in thinking about that aspect of it, I've heard of stories of businesses being awarded contracts from the government, but then not being able to deliver. I mean, how does a small business avoid that type of situation?
Yeah, don't bite off more than you can chew. So there are good things about selling to the government, and there are negatives, right? So here are the good things. We're talking about usually pretty stable contracts, right? And in some cases, very lucrative contracts. Sometimes they're a contract for 2 to 5 years, right? They take a long time compared to B2B or B2C to win these contracts, because they're highly regulated. So there's a lot, as you know, in the government, there's 50 people that can say no, but there's usually not one person that can just say yes to the whole thing, right? So
very true.
There's a lot of coordination and a lot of layers that you have to work through, but that's okay, because you can understand how the government buys what you sell. You don't have to understand the whole thing. You have to understand how the government, just the agency, if you could focus really small, the agency that buys what you sell. But you don't want to take on a contract that you can't complete. It's very hard to recover from that if you don't complete a government contract, or they have to cancel it because you're not doing, I would say, impossible almost to actually recover from that. So my advice would be twofold. One is, as a prime, if you're going, meaning you're going to be the one that has the contract with the government, start with something small. Start with something that just to get your feet wet. Winning your first government contract's usually the hardest one you're going to win. But the second thing, and this is probably more applicable to most of the audience, is look for a subcontracting opportunity. What I mean by that is you can find an opportunity that, let's go back to the accounting firm, right? Maybe you have a small bookkeeping tax prep service. Well, look for a contract from the government that has an aspect of what you do. Maybe it has bookkeeping, but it also has other services related to accounting that you don't do. Well, now, using that same tool I mentioned, USA Spending, you can go and look at companies that have successfully sold to the government. And since you have a lot of military members, and some of them might be service disabled or better known small businesses, the VA buys more from those type of businesses than all of the other agencies. So if you look at the percentage of their contracts, and there's language that actually directs them to do this. So let's say you're selling to the VA, or you find this opportunity with the VA. What I would do is I would go out and I'd find a company that's, maybe still a small business, maybe a service disabled, better known small business but has at least, a few $1 million worth of contracts with the VA, with the one you're selling to. Just approach them like, look, I found this opportunity. I can do the bookkeeping part. Looks like you can do the rest of it. I've been on your website. Maybe we could talk. You're bringing the opportunity to them. They're going to want to talk with you. And now you could set up a subcontracting agreement with them. So now go after the opportunity together. They can show you the ropes. It's a way to get a mentor. It's a way to get some experience, where you're not the prime. And that, I think, is probably the best way to approach it.
So it's kind of, and I've heard this in, talking with various folks that have done that method in sort of a teaming type aspect. Find the prime, look at the work they've done. If you can fill a niche that they have that they may not be able to fill, become that subcontractor. Now, one of the things with all government contracts comes a lot of requirements. So how does so say they subcontract with a prime, who's on the hook for like the big topic today is cybersecurity. And I think you've got to be NIST is the new security protocol, NIST, I think it's called. It's an acronym. Don't ask me what it is, but I know that that's one of the things you got to be compliant with. Would a small business have to be compliant with something like that? Or would that be the prime that?
The prime definitely does. I shouldn't talk in definite or definitely not, right? Every contract is different. Every agency is different. What you're talking about is, so there are a few, there's requirements in every contract, but CMMC is what I believe you're referring to, the cyber maturity. Cyber maturation model. Anyway, the acronym's escaping me right now, but essentially what that is saying is there's a few things that we need to have if we're selling to the government, and it's becoming more and more of a demand. So if anyone listening is actually selling, for instance, I had a client recently that kind of called me in a panic because he has a contract with the Navy and an IDIQ, which is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. And it's a couple $1 million contract. There's delivery orders on there. I mean, they've been paying him through this. And the CEO is like, hey, look, I can't put another delivery order on this contract with you until you do your NIST 800-171 self-inspection. That's part of CMMC. So, but essentially what all of this is, I don't want to confuse everybody. Really what it comes down to is the government wants to put certain controls in place with companies that they're going to put on contract. And they want to make sure that, especially if you're doing anything technology related, although it doesn't have to be, you could still have CMMC would apply in a lot of cases. But if you were a software company, the government wants to make sure that they could actually put your tool, use it on their system, or connect to you the cloud. And the only way and look, I've been in the reverse end of this on the government side, where we put a company on contract. They say they could do everything, right? But they're kind of hand waving. Well, some companies will say whatever they can to win a contract. Now, all of a sudden, I've got a company on contract and I can't connect them to the system. I can't get something called an approval to operate. I need that in order to connect to the system. But it's not my call, and I wouldn't hand wave it anyway, but the separate cybersecurity team is going to review that. And it could be a brutal process depending on what security level you're at. And I'm just giving you an example, by the way. So all of these are basically confidence builders for the government. So if you are going to sell to the government, you want to, first of all, definitely know what they are, right? So look up CMMC online, look up the NIST 800-171 controls, look up FedRAMP if you're a software solution.
That's another one.
Yes. FedRAMP is huge. And, and there's other ones out there. There's some of the Air Force, you can look up Platform One. But all this comes down to is you're building confidence for the government, that the government can actually use your tool, that you have the measures in place that would protect their information, that would give them confidence that you're running your business appropriately and, treating your people correctly, doing the right thing with information and operational security and all of that.
So those are some of the key selection criteria. I would imagine that's part of the process to become a vendor for the government.
Well, if you're listening to this and you're hearing selling to the government for the first time, right? Even if you're a social media manager, they buy some of that as well. So, some unexpected areas. But what you're going to do is first you determine if they buy what you sell, which we went through. Then sam.gov. So if you go to sam.gov, that's the government website where you can register your small business. And we were just talking about this because we both have businesses that are.
That's a fun process, by the way.
Not a fun process, right? Not a, and by the way, all these tools I'm talking about, sam.gov is also, you register your business there, and that's also where you can see solicitation. So, hey, the government wants to buy, or the Navy needs someone to put a new roof on a facility in Florida, right? Well, you'd see that in sam.gov. There's some exceptions, but for the most part, that's where it's coming from. But these websites are not easy to use in some cases. And there's paid for websites as well that you might run across. I think one thing is just knowing that there's paid tools, and I use paid tools, but this is my job, right? And there's free tools. There's really no need to get a paid tool until you're kind of actively selling, in my opinion. But if you were going to start, you would register your business in sam.gov, and then you would start looking at some of the things that, because that process takes some time. So look at some of the certifications that you might need. Start maybe talking with primes. There are mentor protege programs that you could be a part of. And do some research. We for free, and you can go to dodcontract.com, and we have a lot of free interviews, podcasts, things you can listen to there with a lot of different companies. So maybe a company like yours I've interviewed, and they might talk through some of the steps that they took to get there. And every profession is a little bit different. Every industry is a little bit different within the government. So if it buys office supplies different than they buy accounting services.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so you just want to kind of be aware of that. So you can learn a lot for free, and of course we have a course too that they could go on if they were interested in getting a little more kind of one-on-one assessment. But that's what I would do. I would go to sam.gov, register your business, then start talking to other companies that do what you do. Listen to some of the podcasts, and not just mine, but there's some other great resources out there. But they can start pointing you in the right direction.
That sounds like a lot of work. So one of the other things you talk about is, and this is important in business, overall, is networking and relationship building. So tell us a little bit more about why that's important in government contracting.
Yeah. So despite all of the regulations, and when you said it's a lot of work, it's a lot of work. Selling to the government, it's not for, this isn't a get rich quick scheme, right? So selling to the government, you need to plan on 12 to 18 months. You need to plan on 12 to 18 months before you're on contract. It can happen before that, but just plan on the long game. The benefit is there though. If you want to grow your business, if you want to sell your business, government contracts can be one of those things that really increases the value of your company. And a lot of my clients have that intention in mind. And I lost my train of thought here, but you were talking about how difficult it could be to potentially sell to the government.
Well, that and the importance of networking and building those relationships, because there are, I mean, either, it is heavily regulated, and even doing things like that, you need to kind of mind your P's and Q's a little bit.
Yeah. So I think one thing that does get lost is that relationship piece, right?
Mhm.
So you can get lost in the regulations and the certifications and everything else that you need, right? But at the end of the day, there's a person on the other side of, that government
Very
line.
true.
And, so for those of us in the military that were in the military, we have a huge advantage over those that have never been in the government, because we understand how a military base works. We understand a little bit about the positions in an organization.
Mhm.
The relationship is extremely important. So if we want to talk about the real process right now, so this is not what you get on SBA, Small Business Association, or maybe the GSA. This is really how the process works. And this is how I would think about it. First, I usually knew what company I wanted to hire before solicitation went out. Okay. When I say that, I didn't always get to hire the company I wanted to, but most acquisitions officers, before solicitation goes out, there's a phase called the market research phase. And this is where, look, my job was to put companies on contract, manage those contracts, but I was not a cybersecurity expert. I wasn't a construction expert, right? So we had to figure out, we had a requirement in money, but we still need to figure out, hey, what are the best technologies? What are the best solutions? So during that market research phase, the government can talk to you. The government can talk to small businesses. So if anyone's going to have a takeaway, you want to start with one agency, and you can find the offices in a particular agency that buy what you sell. And you're looking for opportunities ahead of the solicitations. You want to know 6 months out, 3 months out. And when you find out about those, see if you can make an appointment. You can respond to something called a request for information. There are conferences and small business meetings. You can use the small business. There's usually a small business office associated with most bases. So you can set up a meeting with the office that buys what you sell. And this is where usually I would recommend find an opportunity first. So you can go in and you can say, hey, look, Rick, we know that you are putting someone on contract to do penetration testing for cybersecurity. Our company is the greatest penetration testing, blah blah blah, and but that's what you're doing. You're coming in, you're talking about your technology, about your business. You're developing that relationship, and you're also helping us to write the solicitation, because what we're doing is we're collecting input from different companies, and the savvy companies knew that they needed to come talk to us. Let us know they existed. Let us know, because let's say that you come in and for the penetration testing, cybersecurity contract, and you convince me. You say, "Hey, look, not only do we do this, I'm a SDVOSB, so maybe now I can set, because this is where this is decided. Can I set it aside for a woman-owned small business? Can I set this aside for a service-disabled veteran-owned small business?" You have to tell the government that you can do the work and that you have that certification. I've never put a company on contract because of their certification. That it's always, can you do the job? That always comes first. But once you prove that you can do the job and that you can help us, like, hey, we recommend that the people have these certifications. We recommend this type of past performance. Maybe you have a GSA schedule or another way for me to put you on contract. You can recommend that, and you can recommend the certification. So by the time that solicitation comes out, all of a sudden now I'm hiring a service-disabled veteran-owned small business with these 3 certifications, with this particular type of technology. And often, if someone's been looking at this for a while, or maybe even trying and failing, they might have the complaint of, this is rigged. It looks like these solicitations are written for my competitor. And I hear that a lot, right? And what I tell people is, it's not rigged, but it was written for your competitor, because your competitor did the work and you didn't. You need to find, and a lot of times it's not even the small business's fault, right? Like, a lot of people don't realize that the government's not going to talk to you after the solicitation comes out, because there are regulations that prohibit it, right? Because we want fairness in contracting, but they can before that. So focus on the market research phase, get in there, have the meeting. This is what's similar to regular sales, right? You want to get in there, build that relationship. So if you do come from B2B or B2C, there is an element to that. It's just the process of starting that piece is a little bit different.
You got to start a little bit earlier, I would say, as far as, when you engage and how you engage, and then, yeah, once that solicitation comes out, you're done at that point. You can't.
All you can do now is write a proposal. And if
Right.
you have, for my clients, I tell them, if you haven't talked to the office, don't even write a proposal. There are certain exceptions to that. There's always an exception, but if there's a certain level of competition, the government probably already knows.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's fair. I mean, it's I in a previous life, I wrote proposals for state, with attorney generals and things like that. And a lot of it they would select up to 3 vendors. And then of those 3 vendors, it would be, you would get awarded contracts. In one year, we won the contract. But what we found is the top 2 vendor, or the other 2 vendors, were incumbents. And so we would get, what the work that they couldn't handle. So it's, that wasn't a fun win for the amount of effort that went into it. But so tell us a little bit about some of the success stories, because I know you've talked about them already, but tell us a little bit more about success stories that you've worked with on the small business side.
Sure. There's a lot. We could talk about, well, here's a veteran-owned business. I'll throw them under the bus, called Street Smart VR, right? And I worked with a few things, but I give them, they take the credit for going through and doing the hard work, as they always do. If you pay a consultant to help you, they can help in a specific area. But they're a great company. And there's a podcast interview you can listen to with Oliver, the CEO, and I think founding partner. But here's a Marine Corps officer that gets out, I want to say he was either lieutenant or captain, and realized there was a need for virtual reality training with security forces. And, a lot of times he found himself in situations where, if you're on a ship or you're in a contained environment, you can't go to the firing range, right? Or conduct something like de-escalation training. And they put together a hell of a system to train security forces and military police, soldiers and sailors. And it goes beyond just, hand-to-hand combat and weapons training. Like I said, de-escalation training. There's they have a whole array of options. And they did a great job of finding and going after something called, it falls under research and development contracts, right? And so Small Business Innovative Research is the name of the program. So if you have a solution, if any of your audience has a solution that even exists right now and that could be modified for government need, or they have an idea, it's patented, they're looking for funding, a lot of our clients will use SBIR contracts instead of venture capital. And now what it typically allows you to do, you retain your IP, you retain ownership of your company, but the government's paying you to develop maybe a prototype or an MVP, help you advance that TRL level. So it's interesting to do that on the government's dime, and the intent is for it to be dual use, right? So, there's, Oliver, but there's several other examples where they've won multiple SBIR contracts and they were able to develop an amazing solution for the government. And, in their case, they were able to not only win those contracts, but to sell them. I think he's in over 50 DoD installations. And I think that's a great example of a military veteran, a young military veteran, smart, savvy. I was able to go out and use the system for exactly the purpose that it was designed for, to develop an amazing solution, get it in the hands of the warfighter, make our country safer, and give him a strong business and a career after the military.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. It's you're right. When you're out floating in the ocean, it's pretty tough to do certain types of training, but we find a way to get it done. But the virtual aspect of it, that's phenomenal. I mean, just the de-escalation aspect to it, and different things that go along with security forces. Because we had a Marine contingent on our first ship that I was on, and because we had nukes, and that was, and this was a few decades ago, so before virtual reality, but it would have been good to have them go through that. But but no, that is exactly, it's interesting you mentioned that, because a lot of other companies that would require venture capital not know about the SBIR funding. I mean, it is a phenomenal way to go do that. And then just the growth that they've had. It sounds amazing. So,
Oh yeah. I mean, there's certainly other stories too, in different areas. So I thought that would be a good one to, to bring up. We've had other cybersecurity veteran-owned companies that have done really well. And again, if you're in a particular area, you can, either send us a note or check out the website and see if there's a episode that we did with a company like yours. But and we're always open to checking something out because there's so many different areas. It's impossible to
sure.
to cover them all. So we'll take any requests and we'll find a company, get them on there and kind of do the interview and go through, because each one's a little bit different. So it's good, especially, obviously I have an affinity for your veteran audience, right? So this is something you want to go into with your eyes open. You don't want to waste time or money. And that's very easy to do in this business. So you want to know who buys what you sell, how do they buy it? And that's going to dictate the steps that you need to take to sell and win.
Yeah, no, that's, very insightful. And it's like I said, a good friend of mine who's got a consulting business, and he's a service disabled Marine, former Marine. And we were actually talking about this exact topic yesterday. So it's fortuitous that you're on the show today, because it'll help us. Just try to figure out that aspect of market research. And he sold to, I believe it's Washington State. I don't know that he did the actual federal government, but I know we're looking at that. So, and we know that there's a long game involved there, but
yeah.
Well, great. Well, let's move into the speed round. Pretty easy questions. I won't toss anything over the fence that's too hard, but so I always love to ask. I always love to ask. So what are the 3 books you'd recommend and why?
Yeah. Well, we are, I think we're talking to business owners, correct, right now?
Correct. Yeah.
So $100 million offers. I don't know if you've heard that one before. It's a really good one if you're in business, and it really walks you through how to make an offer that sells. A lot of not just veteran-owned business, any business. Mm-hmm. A lot of people undervalue what they have. As veterans, it's easy to undervalue our experience, especially if you didn't do something. Like for me, it kind of directly correlates into money, right? So it's a little bit easier. But there are a lot of jobs that, whether it was a leadership position or maybe cybersecurity, there are a lot of jobs that you may have had in the military or in another life that can equal a large paycheck on the other side, providing value. Right. So that book is a great one because it shows you how to combine different things that you're doing and offer high dollar services. Right. So it may change your mindset from trying to charge someone $100 an hour for what you're doing to maybe offering a $25,000 package, which, some companies are going to buy depending on what the value offer is. So, so that is one that I would definitely recommend. As far as other ones, there's one I'm listening to right now. I didn't bring my phone down here. It is, hold on a second here. I don't want to delay your podcast, but this is really a good one. The website's Business Made Simple. I just can't remember the guy's name. I'll send you the note so you can put it in.
That sounds familiar. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, Donald Miller. So he did the Story Brand Framework, which is a famous book. He has one that talks about how to build a small business. The title's escaping me. And he basically talks, maybe it's because he talks about it like building an airplane, right? And that's what I found interesting about this is it's a very concise, logical way to build a business. So he talks about it from leadership to the products that you're offering to how you're going to market them. And then, more, I think, things about a business that people don't think about when they first get into it, which is, well, hey, how are you even going to set up your checking accounts? How are you going to set money aside, setting your taxes aside from your profit and investment? He does a really good job of doing that. It's a little bit different than I've heard in the past. So forgive me for not remembering the exact name of the book, but it's by Donald Miller, and it's really good if you're in business. And so as far as the third book is concerned, I don't know, Atlas Shrugged. I've read that
Oh,
one
that's
a
a good
few
one.
times.
No, that's good.
I've read it a few times, so take it or leave it. But it was a great one. So,
Oh, great. So another question on your top three, what are your favorite movies and why?
oh, man, yeah, people are gonna think I'm just a geek after this, but I've got to go Star Wars because it is.
Nice.
And here's one that's odd. It's just from my childhood as well. The first Clash of the Titans. It was so bad. Like in
Okay.
retrospect, I made my kids sit through this. And if you saw it back in, the early 80s, like I did, even the claymation and whatnot back then wasn't so hot. But today it's laughable. And my kids were just laughing hysterically, like almost
I'm
crying
sure.
as they were watching that. So yeah, no, that was a good one. And I mean, so you probably catch a theme here. Most of my movies are going to be sci-fi related and I'm a huge fan. I'm just going to say the whole Marvel universe, if you'll let me get away
Oh
with
yeah. Okay.
that. So again, I'm in dad mode. So me and my kids, Friday nights, Saturday nights, we're usually watching a movie, and it's usually something of that ilk.
Nice. No, it's I go back and watch the original Star Wars and I'm like scratching my head like, oh my gosh, I really love this show. The first one that they did. And it was
Oh, I know.
and then Empire Strikes Back and then Return of the Jedi. And I'm like, wow. And then because I always joke with my kids, and my kids are all grown, but I always tell them those are my top three Star Wars movies. And they're like, Dad, they are like the worst from a computer graphic, whatever they call
Oh
that
yeah,
stuff. But
there's
I'm like,
groundbreaking back then.
it was. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah, so it's
they got the Mandalorian now, so they can hang out there.
yeah, we're struggling to get through the Mandal. Well, actually, we watched a few of them, but we're
Okay.
yeah, it's not like the old Star Wars. But
Mhm.
well, where can my audience go to learn more about you and what you do to help small businesses get into government contracting?
Yeah, no, so you can go to dodcontract.com. You can see, what we offer there. We have a podcast page as well there, but you can also listen to the podcast on, iTunes, Spotify, wherever they do podcasts. And that's just DoD Contract Academy. And so you can look that up, and, we'd love to have you on there listening to the show. So I would say, and it's all free. And there's a lot of practical advice on there on how to sell to the government. You could really just listen to the podcast and really learn, probably half of what, or if not more, of what you pay someone to teach you. So that's a great resource right there. And that's probably where I'd start.
I'll definitely be checking that out as we go through our journey to achieve that first government contract. But well, no, I greatly appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for joining us today and From Battle to Business. And I'll leave the last few words to you.
Well, yeah, my only last words are going to be, there is a great opportunity out there for all businesses, but I'm speaking to small businesses, and in your case, maybe the SDVOSB or the veteran-owned business community. There's a huge opportunity. Government has to buy from small businesses, but go into it with your eyes open. It's not easy. It does take a long time, but if you approach it in the right way and the step-by-step path, knowing who buys what you sell, know how they make those purchases, as long as your effort's consistent, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of effort, but consistent effort over a period of time is going to bring results. So just do it in a smart way. And I'd like to see you guys out there winning more contracts and, making the country safer. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us. And now we have a resource to send folks to when they need help. So Rick, greatly appreciate having you on the show, and look forward to this episode coming out.
Great. Thanks. Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
Thanks for listening. In order to help others, please subscribe and share this show up with other veteran business owners in your network. If you want specific guidance, feel free to book a complimentary call with Dean at deanvandyke.com. Remember, you wouldn't go into battle alone, and now you don't have to in business.